You are high in the upper Memphis Plateau, which means you are hundreds of feet from the ground. And of course, on this night of all nights, the rain has decidedly stopped, and there are 7 moons in the sky out of the 12. None of those moons are full, but when you have 7 moons, some aspect of waxing or waning gibbous to half moon, now you have a collage of grays and orange, yellow, lavender, silver, and even white light just beaming down into Sharn. And they all feel like they've decided to pick you for the stage spotlight as the guard calls for you to stop moving, fall to your knees, and throw any weapons you may have to the ground. You simply step to the edge of the sky bridge. You turn to look at both sides of the bridge and the guards, and you smile, and you step forward and slam into the hull of a sky skiff that you have had waiting for you. But it's a long fall. You were talking hundreds of feet where your skiff driver had to navigate through, thankfully, a more empty skyscape of Sharn. And as you fall, you realize you're about to hit terminal velocity, and this could end poorly. And so you reach down, you activate your featherfall token, which immediately slows your descent. As you hit the skiff, land in it, the knoll looks back, nods, and says, "Where are we off to?" That Eberron is, and what Eberron is not. So, why are we doing this? Yes, that is because Eberron is a phenomenal setting. It has a lot of potential. However, 99% of the people who get into Eberron or get their hands on it, they are going to simply not get the fullest measure of Eberron because they are going to run it like it's vanilla D&D, and they're going to ruin the experience for themselves. And if they're the DM, you're gonna ruin it for your players. So, with that bold statement out of the way, so why is this boomer chucklehead talking about my precious new Eberron book? Number one, I'm not a boomer. Number two, high likelihood of still being a chucklehead. Jury's out on that. Why I'm doing this is because I have a vested interest in Eberron. I've been playing this setting since the beginning. It's one of my favorite D&D settings, and I think if you have a firm understanding of Eberron, not as a lore dump, but as a tone or a theme, you will be able to take your Eberron games much further than you do a normal D&D game. So, as to why me, well, I was on the Manifest Zone podcast with Keith Baker, who was the original creator of Eberron, along with Christian Serrano, who did the Savage Worlds conversion for Eberron. If you want to check those episodes out, go to manifest.zone. I'll put the link in the description. I also wrote Mage Right Marked Cabal and Claw, which is a look at espionage and special operations within the Eberron setting from a professional eye. There's also a short clip sending stone about it as well over on Manifest Zone that we did. And I also have credits inside of the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, which is the original book that came out before all the rest of the 5th edition stuff really started piling out. So that's me in a nutshell. Not a boomer, potential chucklehead. Now let's talk about inspirations for Eberron. Before we even really begin talking about sort of what it is and what it isn't. Number one, this video is not going to be a lore dump. There's plenty of places for you to go get lore. There's some really good ones that are out recently. The lore is what it is. This is really about how you take the setting and get the most out of it. So for inspirations, you're looking at TV shows, Tales of the Gold Monkey, Young Indiana Jones, Firefly, yes, Tailspin, yes, that Tailspin, I'm not even kidding. You can do Andor. There's quite a few TV shows that you really can wrap your head around. Man, SEAL Team. You're going to see why I'm naming some really odd things, and it seems to be all over the place in genre. And trust me, it's not. It all has a thing. Tehran, another show you can look at, and when you have the right attitude in mind, you'll be able to collapse down and understand how it all fits into Eberron. For movies, this is where it usually shines through and a lot easier for people. The Mummy, Disney's Atlantis, Maltese Falcon, Treasure Planet, Indiana Jones, Manchurian Candidate, Chinatown, Star Wars, of course, is the big pulp space adventure. Those are all great reference points and good starting points. And you can go from there with The Lost Worlds, Alan Quartermain, any of those things, The Librarian, any of those movies. For books, start with Dreaming Dark. It's a trilogy. It's written by Keith Baker that clearly lays out exactly what Eberron is about. Audiobook wise, I don't know. The pronunciation is a little weird, but go from there. And after that, they have an entire line of Eberron books, and they will tackle multiple aspects of the setting. They're all recommended. It's fantasy adventure novels. You know what you're getting. And then there's some comic books and stuff that are involved for Eberron as well. So, video games. If you like me, when I'm working on something, I'll play video games that sort of match the setting or the tone and the themes that I'm going for. And so you're looking at games like Tomb Raider, Uncharted, Far Cry 3, Far Cry 4, Lego Indiana Jones, games of that type. You're going to have a really good time with. Other games, and this is for my D&D people who you only look at D&D because that's the be-all, end-all of things. Cool. If you want to get the most out of Eberron, I'm not telling you to go play other games or learn other games. I'm saying if you have an opportunity to look at these other rule books, not from a mechanics perspective, but from design perspectives and their tone and their theme, they are going to help you out understand Eberron better. Broken Compass, Savage Worlds, Hollow Earth Expedition, and Call of Cthulhu. All really good ways of opening yourself up to what essentially is a pulp action adventure setting. Okay, so inspirations are out of the way. Those are things, it's a lot of homework to do. I know it seems crazy. You just want to open the book and you just want to have long swords and go punch goblins in the face. Okay, cool. Don't do that in Eberron. Go do that nonsense in Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk. Leave Eberron to a much more imaginative types. Spicy take, I know. I'm already getting people riled up, I'm sure. Let's talk about player types. So you're going to have players who are not going to gravitate to Eberron. If you are a dyed-in-the-wool person who believes that Lord of the Rings or Narnia or any other classic fantasy setting is the be-all, end-all of fantasy, you are not going to enjoy Eberron, more than likely. You can try to let go, but you're going to have to let go. You're not doing those things in Eberron. Those settings have a tone and a theme that are different than Eberron. Can you do those things in Eberron? Yes, you could have as many boring, lame adventures in Eberron and stories about trees walking as you want in Eberron. No one's going to stop you. But if you want to really understand Eberron and play Eberron to its fullest, you're not going to want to do any of those things. You're going to want to expand your horizons. For the min-maxers, you might run wild in Eberron. I don't know. There's a lot of things to do, and you might become frustrated because the tone and the theme of the setting should control you and not limit what you do, but sort of help rein you in to what's going on. You might become a little frustrated on that, depending on what game system you use. And we'll talk about that near the end. For the people who enjoy world lore or immersion, that kind of thing, you are going to have a good time, but you may be overwhelmed because there is a lot of lore to Eberron. There is a ton of lore to Eberron. And so how do we really get around some of that? I know it feels like there's a lot to read. There's a lot of videos, a lot of books. I advise getting the 3.5 edition of D&D, the Eberron campaign guide. That is the first campaign guide that really lays out the world as it was intended. Every edition has changed things, sometimes because it had to add species or had to add classes. Okay, awesome. But some of the newer stuff is just completely detracted from the setting's intent. Dragon marks were created and applied to a species for a purpose, not because it was Keith Baker was being mean. House Lyrander has the dragon mark they have, and they're half elves, not because anyone is mean or they want to take away your fun. It's just because it's ingrained in the setting. The Horavar are the half elves of the continent of Corvair. When you understand that and you understand the Draconic Prophecy, there's a lot to go into it. But yes, get that book. Get that book at all costs and really understand the lore behind it. Forget the mechanics. No one cares about the mechanics of that. You're going to play the system you're going to play, but the lore is really important. Okay, so what is Eberron? Well, let's first talk about what Eberron isn't. It is not steampunk. Holy God, stop saying that. It is not diesel punk. Jesus wept. If it's not steampunk, it can't possibly be diesel punk. It's not. It's also not mage punk, magitech, none of that nonsense. It's not. Magic in Eberron is not high. It is wide because it's ubiquitous. It affects almost everyone's lives. And there is some dangerous stories to be told when magic is not replacing technology. Magic enhances technology. For instance, you don't have firearms in Eberron. You don't need firearms in Eberron. It's also not wands are not guns. That's also a mistake a lot of people make. There is a way around these things. You have to be creative and inventive, but it's not firearms. If you're putting firearms in Eberron, you have already ruined the setting. I'm just being honest with you. You're not understanding the depth of lore and the tone and the theme and the intent of Eberron by putting guns in it. You don't need them. We'll talk about that as well. It really is system dependent, but I'll give you some examples. It is not boring ass vanilla D&D. If you want that, go play Forgotten Realms and go play Greyhawk. Go do something else. You don't play Eberron because you want to just do the things you normally do in those settings. The Eberron is about expanding horizons and being big damn heroes doing big damn dumb things. And now that I've almost choked to death, lastly, what it isn't, it is not boring. If Eberron, you find Eberron being boring, you're not embracing it. Oh, it's not for you. One of the two things. There's a lot to the setting. If you're bored in Eberron, that's a you problem in one way or shape or the other. So it just is what it is. Feel free to disengage from an Eberron campaign. Then just sit and play a game that you're not happy with. It's a whole different advice section. All right. So what is Eberron? It is pulp action. It was pulp action adventure. It is two-fisted, just it is two-fisted punching, two-fisted gunplay. It is fighting Nazis. Yes, everyone has its own Nazis. Actually, yeah, it's a pretty interesting combination of Nazis and Al Qaeda. We'll talk about that. It's going to exotic locations. It's having unreliable supernaturalism. It's mysticism. There's some hints of colonialism in Eberron. There's a lot to explore in Eberron. What else is it? If you're looking at ideas for how to design adventures or kind of what to do or how things shape up, depending on if you're doing like this Indiana Jones style campaign, you're going to want to look at those influences. But also, if you're just playing an intrigue campaign in Sharn, the City of Towers, or any other major cities across the continent or the world, then it's Shadowrun. If you're not using cyberpunk adventures and modules and Shadowrun adventures and modules, and you were playing in Sharn as Inquisitives or Dark Lanterns or adjacent to any of these organizations, you are far afield. Find those things and pull them in and get them converted. It's super easy to do. Cthulhu, Eberron is also this pulp horror intrigue. I'm not talking tentacle monsters, although the Delcure exists and they're somewhere deep inside of Kyber. What I mean is how Cthulhu plays out and that slow drip of tension and terror. You can pull that into Eberron. That's part of that intrigue when you realize there's betrayals and things aren't what you thought they were, which goes along with the cyberpunk, which goes along with the Shadowrun, which goes along with pulp. It all blends together. It is also high if you set it into a city on urban intrigue, thriller, magic intrigue, things like that. There's a lot to it. So how do you kind of loop this all together? Because I don't want this video to be forever. I just want to give people an idea of here's how we best play Eberron. You have to understand that if you're playing in Corvair, you are playing in essentially Europe, post-World War I and pre-World War II, There's an uneasy truce. Syria was nuked out of existence by an unknown means. This huge wall that you can't fly through because terrible things will happen if you go into Syria, which is now the Morn land. Terrible things will happen if you try to go anywhere close to it. Terrible things might still happen. So understand that. So you've got this like late 20s, maybe mid 20s to the late 20s. I usually use like 1930 to 38 idea in my head of what I want when I run Eberron. So and with that, it's not the Middle Ages. It's not medieval Europe. That's the biggest mistake I think people make. Is you have to be willing to pull up some images of Europe in the 1920s, 1930s, and you look at like the cities, and then you look at the same year, and you'll look at villages, and one looks very much like, oh God, that looks like Hobbiton out here in the farmlands. But meanwhile, here in the city, there's cars and there's Art Deco and there's dirigibles. That's what you're looking at as well. Embrace all of that, but it's by all means it's not just stupid medieval fantasy. Sharn is not just one big platform where there's all these castle towers everywhere. You have to understand that those towers are so massive that one tower might be, say, 50 foot thick. And when we talk 50 feet thick, it's not 50 feet of solid concrete. No, it's here's your outer wall, here's your inner wall. And in here are other towers. There are office buildings, essentially. There are offices, homes, apartments, shops. There's a lot of things going on inside. So you look at these towers, and that's where Sharn can become a little overwhelming. But Sharn is New York City or London or wherever you need to set it to get an understanding of, okay, here's a place with skyscrapers, and inside these skyscrapers are going to be all these weird shops and places to live and all these things. There's a place here in Memphis called the Concourse, and I use that for my idea of like, okay, cool, if I had a concourse, but then I had thousands of concourses where it's everything you need is in one little tower, including where you live. It's almost like a mega block from Judge Dredd. Also think of it that way. It's another good influence for how you want to see things, especially on those lower levels of Sharn going down into the cogs. Art Deco is big. I know people go, oh my God, I can't do this. You're already telling me it's not medieval fantasy. Right, yeah, but Art Deco is important because it's an expression of things, and so you can pull that into it. And if it pulls you out of like your presumptive nature of Eberron, that means you already are assuming that you're just playing traditional Dungeons and Dragons fantasy nonsense games. You gotta marry those two together. This is a foreign world. Uh, it does not sit in the multiverse like the normal other universes do. The moons are may or may not be real. There's go look at the lore. That's why it's here. But some of the other things that you have a refugee crisis going on. The war ended. Siri, the ones who didn't die are now living elsewhere. They're living in Brayland in huge numbers. Karnath, Thrain, Aundare didn't really get that many. Up to you. Who cares? Some even went to other places when they spread out. They went to New Galifar and Kabar. And so, but you have to look at these things and use that. What does a refugee crisis look like? Well, Syria was really the focal point of the war. That's kind of their fault, all that got started. And so now you got all these refugees that are now in these towns and cities, and they're not wanted for the most part. They're seen as problematic. And while every one of the five nations, they all speak common, you're going to have accents. Yes, you're all going to speak English, but it's like, if you're speaking English, and we'll use America, that's where I'm from, you can tell when someone's from New England versus the Deep South versus the Mid South versus the Midwest versus the North, up towards Canada or in the West Coast. We just have these different vernaculars, different ways of how we say things and expressions. You're going to have that. You're not going to be able to hide the fact that you're a Syrian refugee, but it creates interesting stories. Then you have a nation to the west of Brayland, which is Droam. And Droam is a nation of monsters. It is literally ruled by monsters. It is the traditional monster race is creating their own identity and forging a nation. And their demands to be led into the Council of Cool. And how do you affect that? What do you do with that? Because in Eberron, alignment doesn't have the same meaning as it does in normal D&D. And it hasn't since the beginning. So this isn't a modern thing. It's always been this way. You got Dakan. Dakan is the empire of the goblins, and they once controlled all of Corvair. And they have deep legends about it, and they have their own mystical metals and forging skills. And now they're relegated to this tiny little slice of land, and they feel some kind of way about it. You have the Warforged. You have an entire species of people who were created for one principle, and that is to slaughter, because the human cost was becoming too much. And so the humans, by way of House Cannith, decided to create an entire race of people who were worth nothing except the time and energy put into them to create them and to send them into combat and to be sold off to every nation with no allegiance to any one nation by House Cannith nor the rest of the dragon marked houses. So you've got this, and now they've been told, hey, congratulations, war is over. Go be your own species. And the oldest of them are, I think, 14 years old. They're not old in like longevity dwelling on Corvair. So but they don't know any better. So now they're learning their way, and do they have a soul? They don't have, priests. Are they welcome in these things? And those are things for you to explore. That's another aspect where it's completely different. Speaking of the Dragon Marked houses, and again, going back to the Shadowrun thing, they are essentially mega corporations. They are a cabal of people who made probably millions, if not billions, of gold off of the last war. They didn't sit it out, but they also didn't choose sides. They just produce. And so you might be on an Ondare front line and on a Carnathi front line, and you got House Denaith trained mercenaries fighting each other. That creates interesting stories, but they made a lot of money, and not everyone is going to assume that that was a positive thing when the rest of the world is trying to recover from this war and all the expenditures of this 100-year war. And now you and your little team are sitting pretty because you got cool tattoos. Essentially, they're not really tattoos, but they give you special powers, and you feel some kind of way about that with your pinky up dining. That creates things. Then you got the governments who are, are they effective? Are they ineffective? Who knows? Some of them much more than others. You've got one government who you sign to service, and when you die in battle, will you continue to serve because they're going to raise you from the dead, and not in the good way. They're going to create you and make you into a Carnathi skeleton or a Carnathi zombie, and you're going to continue to fight. Service is forever in Carnath. And then in Braylon, you got a king who has multiple intelligence services at his disposal, and he's willing to use them for the benefit of Braylon. So I think that also separates Eberron from, oh my God, we're in water deep, and the council hasn't stopped. Completely different things. Speaking of Forgotten Realms and like my contempt for some of this stuff, Eberron also doesn't have a lot of like epic tier heroes. If you look at the literal word decimation, that last war, if you're looking in D&D terms, which I think everyone is comfortable with, you don't see many people above like 6th level. Everyone was murdered and killed for the most part. You're not going to have some retired ass 40th level wizard who just happens to be a bartender who's doing nothing about any of the problems anymore. You don't get that in Eberron. NPCs are like far and wide in the NPC like classes. There's Magerite. Magerite is an entire NPC class that was created because they're the ones who go and like make the street lanterns work, and they'll keep the lightning rail going and things like that. So you have to look at it with that eye. You have a lot of potential wrapped up into understanding that you are the big damn heroes. And when you move into 6th, 7th, 8th level, or wherever you're going, whatever your advancement system is going to be for whatever system you're using, that's going to become very impressive very soon. But you're also going to begin attracting enemies, more and more enemies, onlookers, strap hangers, all the things that you would equate to being a famous explorer or actual war hero that is known and out there. Think about the podcasts that are out there from the special operations community. Like, these people are gathering these follies. That's sort of your characters. You are now in positions of dominating social life. Use that against your players, and players use that for your role play. Like I said, magic is not technology. It does not replace technology. Here's what I mean by that. My best example is the crossbow. You don't need firearms because you have a crossbow. And I know people are like, well, repeating crossbows are boring and lame. Okay, stop. So This is why I need you to think outside the box. If you're playing D&D, you give the crossbow, right? You create it. You have dragon shards, which allow spells and powers and things to be put onto these objects. So now you got a crossbow. It's all enchanted up by an artificer and mage rights and all that jazz, and you can sell them for whatever prices. Look in the DMG. You're turning it into a firearm essentially, because now you're going to give it the burst fire property out of the rifles, the modern firearms out of the Dungeon Master's Guide. If you're playing Savage Worlds, my crossbows have rate of fires. So it has a rate of fire of 2, 3, 4, depending on what I need. And I have arbalists that are rate of fire 4 and 5, just like light machine guns. Think outside the box. Use the tone of the setting and the intent of the setting to form the rules. Don't look at the rules to form the setting. That's the biggest mistake I think people make with Eberron. You have to understand intent, and then make the rules work within that intent. I can't say that enough. Do not put guns in Eberron. It's stupid. It's really dumb, actually. It's lazy. That's why. Honestly, it's just lazy. It's lazy GMing, lazy writing. And a couple of examples of real quickly before we wrap up. You should be doing things like we had a Warforged Paladin who was trying to discover if he had a soul or not and what it meant to serve others out of desire instead of out of requirement. And he took a running leap, slammed through a window out of Morgrave University, one of its libraries. And we're talking probably a mile up from the ground, and made the leap onto the deck of an airship that they were engaging with in airship to airship combat, and began fighting on the deck of the ship. That is Eberron. Not teleporting, not using grapple hooks or anything, just full tilt run, and then making the world's craziest maneuver. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that if you're looking for something interesting to do, think about Firefly and the train job. You're coming in, that's your airship, this is the lightning rail, and you're coming in over it, and you're putting your team on board the lightning rail, because sometimes you got to aim to misbehave. Until next time. If you ask me to put my money where my mouth is, I will be running an Eberron campaign using Savage Worlds. I think it's the best fit for the setting, to be honest, in game system wise, but I will be doing that over on the Moonskull channel. Link will be in the description. It'll be Sundays at about 1:30 Central, starting after the first of the year. Come check it out if you want to see, can I walk the walk now that I've talked the talk. And as always, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Deuces.